This is an article from mysteriousuniverse.org entitled "The Man with a Sinister Smile. His Name was Indrid Cold" by Nick Redfern. The Grinning Man is a man in black type being that wears a black suit, a black fedora, and who sports a terrifying smile, hence his name. Christine grew up in West Texas and was confronted on more than a few occasions by one of the weirdest and creepiest offshoots of the extraterrestrial M.I.B mystery, namely, the so-called Grinning Man. Christine says, quote, "I haven't told a lot of people about it. When I first saw the person, I was about 1 or 2 years old. I have a very long memory. It was like the typical thing that you hear. It was this man who would stand in the doorway of my bedroom. I remember standing up in my crib and holding onto the bars, and he wore a fedora and a tan raincoat and black trousers, shiny shoes and black leather gloves. His face wasn't like someone who had been burned, but he just stood there and would grin. There was nothing friendly about the way he was grinning. It was horrible, emotionless, didn't blink. And he came off and on for a few years. Even as I got older and slept in my own bed, I would wake up sometimes, like at 3 o'clock in the morning, and that went on. That still happens. All of a sudden I'll be wide awake at 3 o'clock in the morning for no apparent reason. But as a kid I'd wake up at 3 o'clock and he'd be there. I didn't have any frame of reference for it. Of course, my mom didn't believe me. She just thought I was dreaming. But there were all sorts of strange paranormal things that happened throughout my childhood, and I wonder if it was all part of the same thing. I even got weird phone calls as a teenager. The phone would ring and it sounded like a little kid speaking in another language, just rapidly talking into the phone. I thought at the time that it was some little kid got on a payphone and started dialing numbers from another country. But when I read the Mothman prophecies, I went, holy shit, this was the same thing. What kind of validated that this person was real was that when I was 12, a friend and I were out riding our bikes at about 9:30 at night in the summer. It was a small town in West Texas, and we stopped and were looking in the doors of the Baptist church as they had just put in new carpets. A big Saturday night. But we both turned at the same time to look behind us, and this man appeared like right on the edge of the street light and started walking towards us, and he was wearing the exact same outfit, the fedora and the tan overcoat and black pants. But this time, his whole head and hands were bandaged. We didn't speak. We just took off like a shot, around the corner, to her house. We didn't know what to make of it, but I thought it was probably that same person that I used to see. I've never saw him again. When I got into my early 20s, I was living in Dallas and I met a girl. We got to talking about paranormal stuff, and she lived in Lufkin, in East Texas. She said that she and her sister shared a room and that sometimes she would wake up and there would be this man in her room. One night, she woke up and he was looking at her, but he was petting her sister's head while she slept. And then, a few years later, another friend of mine who had grown up in New York, she had seen a similar man that would stand in her room. I thought, okay, that's great. I am absolutely not nuts. I had lights that would turn off and on. My stuff got moved around all the time. I still have my things get moved around. I had a poster of Marilyn Monroe jump off my wall. It was like 6 o'clock. I think I was 16, and it just flew off the wall and into the middle of the floor. I grew up in a really religious family, Southern Baptist, so that was all something of the devil, although I don't believe that now. There was another visible entity that used to show up. It was black, sort of shapeless, but had these enormous eyes, kind of like the quintessential way we depict aliens, the great big eyes, but they were silvery with no pupil. They had a reflective quality. Again, it would be 3 o'clock in the morning and I would feel my bed jolt, and I would look down and see those eyes right over the edge of my bed and the black shapelessness around it. I turned on the light once I got my courage up. I thought, if I don't move, it's going to kill me, and if I do move, it's going to kill me. Again, I was 16 or 17. I screamed for my mom. I just told her I had a nightmare, but then I saw it again. One morning I was getting ready to go to school and I turned toward the shower and I could see the eyes looking between the hooks on the shower curtain. The final time this thing ever appeared, I didn't see it. I had a friend sleeping over, a senior in high school. She had never been to my house and I never told her about any of this kind of stuff. She was very religious, didn't really believe in any of this or would have said it was the devil. We're up the next morning and she was helping me make my bed, and I said, "It was a lot of fun. You should come back over." And she looked at me and said, "I'm sorry. I'm never gonna come back here." I said, "What did I do?" She said, "You didn't do anything. How do you not remember?" I said, "I really don't know what you're talking about. You'll have to tell me." She said she woke up suddenly during the night and she thought that she couldn't see. Then, when her eyes adjusted, adjusted. There was a face so close to hers that she couldn't see anything else. I asked her what it looked like and she said the same thing. These big eyes and just black. She said she screamed so loud she figured she woke the whole neighborhood. All I did, according to her, was lift up and sit on my elbow and look at her and said, "Are you okay?" And she said she was and went back to sleep. My mom didn't hear it either. And surely enough, she never came back to my house. I did have a person who would actually call me and talk to me while I was in high school. It may have just been some nut, but he seemed to know everywhere that I went. I took dance classes in Abilene and I had friends that lived there as well. And this person would call late at night and ask, "How was your dance class?" He knew my every move, which was odd. They wouldn't tell me who they were. They knew a week's worth of my activities. I might have decided to see a friend and not had those plans prior, so no one would know where I was going, but this person knew where I had been. At this point, there appears to be a logical break in the article, where the witness concludes by going on to describe an apparent final encounter with the Grinning Man by saying, quote, "The last time I saw him was in a dream when I was 13, and it was like a lucid dream, and I was in a store, looking at a rack of magazines, and I turned and looked to my left, and there he is, and he's got a magazine in his hand and staring right at me and grinning. And in the dream, I put my magazine down, and I walked right past him and told him, 'Don't ever come here again,' and he never did. That was the last time I saw him, physically or in a dream. I just decided, right there, in my dream, I'm not having this anymore." End quote. Now, we get to the ultimate Grinning Man, Indrid Cold. It revolves around a man named Woodrow Derenberger. Everyone called him Woody. It was shortly after 6 p.m. in the evening when Woody Derenberger was driving home from his job as a sewing machine salesman at JCPenney's in Marietta, Ohio, to his farmhouse in Mineral Wells, West Virginia. The ride home was overcast and dreary. It was misting a light rain. As Derenberger came up on the intersection of I-77 and Route 47, he thought that a tractor-trailer truck was tailgating him without its lights on, which was unnerving. So he swerved to the side of the road, and much to his surprise, the truck appeared to take flight and seemed to roll across his panel truck. To his astonishment, what Derenberger thought was a truck was a charcoal-colored UFO without any lights on. It touched down and then hovered about 10 inches above the berm of the road. Much to Derenberger's surprise, a hatch opened and a man stepped out looking like, quote, "any ordinary man you would see on the street. There was nothing unusual about his appearance," end quote. Except the man was dressed in dark clothing and had a quote-unquote beaming smile. As the man proceeded to walk toward Derenberger's panel truck, the quote-unquote craft jetted up to about 40 feet in the air where it floated above the highway. What happened next was unsettling, because as the darkly dressed man came up toward the vehicle, Woody Derenberger heard the words, "Do not be afraid. I mean you no harm. I only want to ask you a few questions." Derenberger did become afraid because as the man spoke to Woodrow, his lips did not move. The man then moved to the opposite of the truck and told Derenberger to roll down his window so they could talk better, which he did. Next, what formed in Derenberger's mind were the words, "Now you can speak, or you can think. It makes no difference. I can understand you either way." This is what the dark man said. Later, when Derenberger was questioned on local live television, he was scrutinized over what seemed a contradiction because if the dark man communicated through a type of mental telepathy, why would Derenberger need to roll down his window to talk? Wouldn't it be easier just to talk mentally? Woodrow Derenberger explained it was because Indrid Cold wanted to look directly at him as they spoke, and he felt that, really, Cold wasn't so interested in what was said, but more interested in keeping up a communication with him. To Derenberger, that seemed the entire point of it all. Derenberger also noted that when Cold stared into his eyes, it was as if he knew everything about Woodrow Derenberger, and also, if he could only let go of his fear and do the same, he felt he would also know and understand all about Cold. In any event, Cold spoke through the passenger side window the entire time. The physical description of Cold was commonplace. Derenberger described him as about 35 years of age, having a trim build, was about 6 feet tall, 185 pounds with dark eyes and dark hair slicked straight back. Cold wore a long dark coat, and beneath the coat Woodrow Derenberger was able to glimpse the fabric of his quote-unquote uniform that glistened beneath the coat. He also described Cold as having a quote-unquote tanned complexion. Throughout the conversation, Cold kept a frozen smile and curiously hid his hands beneath his armpits most of the time. Cold did, however, point at the city lights above the distant hills of Parkersburg and asked Mr. Derenberger, "What do you call that over there?" Derenberger said, "Why, that's Parkersburg and we call that a city." Cold responded, "Where I come from, we call it a gathering." Indrid Cold later added the curious statement that, "I come from a place less powerful than yours." As the men talked, cars passed under the craft which drifted above the road. The occupants were seemingly unaware of the spaceship being there. After all, there were no lights that could be seen. Cold then asked about Parkersburg. "Do people live there or do they work there?" Woody Derenberger answered, Why, yes, people live and work there. Cold interjected. Do you work, Mr. Derenberger? Woodrow told Cold his name as the conversation began. Derenberger answered, I am a salesman. That's what I do. Do you have a job? Cold answered, Yes, I am a searcher. After that, the conversation became mundane. Cold seemed to notice Woodrow Derenberger was scared and commented on it. Mr. Derenberger claimed Cold asked him, Why are you so frightened? Do not be afraid. We mean you no harm. You will see that we eat and bleed the same as you do. And then added an emotive note, We only wish you happiness, which Cold said to the frightened man more than once. While Mr. Derenberger was being interviewed on live television on WTAP-TV, he attributed this puzzling statement to Indrid Cold. At the proper time, the authorities will be notified about our meeting and this will be confirmed. The entire conversation took between 5 and 10 minutes, and then Indrid Cold looked inside Woody's car with his ever-present smile and said, Mr. Derenberger, I thank you for talking to me. We will see you again. And that's a story for another day.